I saved the company, but my boss gave my promotion to his son. The next Monday morning, I returned to the office, and everything changed. What happens next will leave you speechless. Monday morning started sharp, just the way I liked it. The city was still rubbing sleep from its eyes as I walked toward the office. The sky a dull gray blanket stretched over the skyline. I had my usual black coffee in hand, briefcase in the other, and the kind of calm focus that only comes when you know exactly what the day is supposed to bring. For me, it was supposed to bring a promotion, a long-awaited one. The director of operations title had been in reach for almost 2 years, but now, after everything I'd done to save the company, it felt like more than a possibility. Felt earned. Deserved. The memory of that breach was still fresh. Our firewalls cracked wide open. Internal systems leaking like a pipe burst in winter. I had worked 36 hours straight, no breaks, no sleep, just pure focus, rewriting protocols, isolating infected servers, rerouting back-end operations through mirrored clouds I built myself years prior, just in case something like this ever happened. Greg had called me the company's spine after that. Told me the board didn't even need to know the full extent. I'd handled it like a ghost in the wire. I remember the weight in his voice when he said it. I believed him, so I didn't expect confetti when I walked in. But I expected something. What I got instead was a surprise party. I stepped into the main hallway and was immediately hit with the scent of frosting and cheap cologne. Laughter echoed off the glass-paneled walls. People were gathered around the open area near the elevators. Some clapping, some smiling too wide, a few pretending they weren't surprised. I slowed my pace. There was a banner stretched across the ceiling. "Congratulations, Eli." I froze. Balloons bobbed gently on string, gold and white. A sheet cake sat on a metal cart. "Welcome, Director," scrawled in bright red icing. My eyes followed the writing, then up to the man holding the knife like he was cutting into his own legacy. Eli.
Gregesson.
Dressed in a navy blue blazer a size too big and a smirk too confident for someone who had never led a team, never built a system, never spent one full night fixing someone else's disaster. I watched him slice into the cake while an assistant handed him a congratulatory envelope. Someone handed him a pen to sign his formal contract. I watched it all in slow motion. Then I saw Greg. He was standing just behind the crowd, clapping gently, like this was all very normal. His tie was loosened, his blazer off, sleeves rolled up. Casual, comfortable, like he hadn't just gutted my career in front of the entire team. Our eyes locked. I was 10 steps away from him, but it felt like a canyon between us. My legs didn't move. My jaw tightened. I waited for him to flinch, to explain, to show some shadow of guilt. But instead, he smiled. A small, practiced grin. The kind you wear when you know you're about to lie and don't care who sees it. He stepped forward, pushing past an intern, and casually called out, "Morning, Dev." His voice was too calm, almost cheerful, like nothing had changed. "I hope you don't mind," he continued, sliding one hand into his pocket like we were sharing a private joke. "I thought this move just made sense long-term. You're solid where you are." I didn't answer. I felt heat rise in my chest, but not like fire, more like pressure, like air trapped in a sealed room. My fingers gripped the handle of my briefcase a little tighter, my knuckles white. I glanced once more at Eli, who was laughing now, arms around 2 department heads I had trained myself. "Solid where I am," I repeated in my head. That was all I was to him, a placeholder, a workhorse. He never meant to give me that promotion. I realized it in that moment, like a door slamming shut in my mind. The pats on the back, the words of encouragement, the late-night strategy calls. All of it had just been maintenance. Keep the machine running, keep Dev happy, until his son was ready to wear the crown. I gave a slight nod. No words, no scene. I turned, walked through the crowd without a sound. I passed people whose names I remembered from first-day onboarding sessions. People I helped get hired. People who didn't look me in the eye now. My shoes made soft thuds on the carpet, the only sound I focused on. I reached my office. Same corner cubicle. Same view of the rusted rooftop generator outside, and stepped in. I placed my briefcase on the desk, sat down slowly, and stared out the window. My heart beat steady, but my mind was racing. Not with anger, with questions, with calculations. What did this really mean? How long had they planned it? What conversations had I never been invited to? I opened my drawer and pulled out the notebook I kept for personal logs. The leather was worn. I flipped to a blank page and wrote one word at the top. Observe. That would be the first step. No reaction. No response. Just watch. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal ran before I made any moves. But there was no doubt in my mind now. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was something built behind closed doors. I intended to find those doors and open them. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded across my lap. Outside, the celebration continued, muffled now by distance. But I could still hear Eli's voice. Honestly, I owe everything to my dad for believing in me, he was saying. He saw something others didn't. He saw a name he wanted on the wall. Not someone who earned it, but someone who shared his blood. A small knock came at my door. It was Marcus, from finance. One of the few decent ones. He poked his head in, his expression a mix of awkward and pity. "Hey," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt. Just, I figured you might want a piece of cake before it's all gone." I stared at him. I almost smiled. Almost. "No thanks," I replied softly. "I'm not hungry." He nodded and left without another word. I sat still for a long while. Long enough for the celebration to die down. Long enough for the noise to fade into silence. The kind of silence that speaks louder than applause. And I closed the door gently behind me. I sat at my desk, staring at the monitor. The screen glowed softly in the darkened room. The cursor blinked in the corner of an empty spreadsheet, waiting for input. But I didn't touch the keyboard. I wasn't working. I wasn't even pretending anymore. My hands were still, resting on the edge of the desk. My eyes didn't see the numbers. They saw memories, faces, words I now understood differently. I thought back to the first day I met Greg. 7 years ago, when this job was still new, and I had something to prove. I was 28 then. Fresh out of one failure and eager to bury it beneath long hours and good work. Greg was already established, the kind of boss who didn't bother with company slogans. He liked numbers. He liked people who didn't need to be told twice. And he liked me, or so I thought. "You're sharp," he had said during my first month. "You remind me of a younger me. Just don't burn out." I remember the way he leaned forward when he said it, voice low, like it was a secret between warriors. I took it as a compliment. I stayed late. I came in early. I studied systems no one asked me to learn. I volunteered for the projects nobody else wanted. Greg noticed. He invited me to happy hours, included me in closed-door meetings, called me into his office when something was on the line. We weren't friends exactly, but we were something close to trust. I helped him build 3 divisions, each one more complex than the last. When the integration project nearly collapsed in 2019, I was the one who salvaged it, rewriting the codebase over a long weekend while Greg was off networking at a conference in Miami. I never asked for credit. I figured loyalty would echo back someday. I thought I was playing the long game. Turns out I was just being played. I blinked slowly and leaned back in my chair, the synthetic leather creaking under the weight. The soft hum of the air conditioning was the only sound in the office. Everyone else was at lunch or pretending to be busy congratulating Eli. I stared at the edge of the desk and wondered how long this had been in motion. The answer came slowly, like old dust settling on truth. A few months back, Greg had called me into his office to talk strategy. He had asked detailed questions that at the time felt flattering. He wanted to know how I built redundancies into the pipeline systems, how I forecasted for outages, how I rerouted vendor dependencies when budgets shifted. I thought he was grooming me for a bigger role. I even thanked him afterward. But now I knew better. He wasn't learning from me. He was building a map for his son. 2 weeks after that conversation, I had walked into the conference room for a budget meeting and saw a printout left by the projector. I picked it up out of habit. It was familiar, formatted in my style, using my headers, even the color coding I always used for high-risk items. But the initials at the bottom weren't mine. Ing. Eli Morris. I had paused there, standing alone in that room, holding proof that something was being stolen from me. Quietly, piece by piece. From that moment on, everything changed. I didn't rage. I didn't raise alarms. I adjusted. I started documenting. Not to retaliate, at least not yet. Just to understand. Just to track. I kept everything. Emails. Messages. Slack threads where Eli asked me quick questions. That sounded an awful lot like someone trying to learn a job they hadn't earned. I set up a packet sniffer on the internal network. Nothing illegal, just a tool meant to detect vulnerabilities. It logged inbound and outbound data packets, timestamps, file movement. Our IT policy covered it under routine diagnostics. No one questioned it, especially not Greg. I even created a private cloud folder on a secure server I'd built at home years ago. Every document Eli opened, every report he modified, every change he made, I mirrored and stored. Not altered, not edited, just preserved. A shadow archive, just in case. From the outside, I was the same. I showed up early. I stayed late. I smiled when Eli cracked dumb jokes in the Monday stand-ups. I played dumb when he shared new process ideas that were pulled straight from my own documentation. But I was memorizing the battlefield. Every inch, every corner. And something else started to shift. I noticed how Greg looked at me now, distant, almost nervous, like someone afraid of the mirror. He avoided long conversations. He gave feedback through middle managers. It was subtle but clear. He was pulling back, trying to erase the trail. But he was too late. I remembered a conversation we'd had a year ago. After a company-wide restructuring, I had suggested we draft a resilience strategy. A plan for promoting internal talent to fill key roles in case of unexpected exits. Greg had loved the idea. Smart, he'd said. Shows foresight. I found that document now, buried in my drive, and laughed to myself. That plan was supposed to protect people like me. Instead, it had been weaponized to justify skipping me altogether. His son didn't come from outside. He was internal talent, technically. No one would question it if the policy backed it up. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. The screen in front of me still blinked. I typed a single sentence into a blank notepad file. You made me invisible so he could feel important. I didn't know why I wrote it, but it felt right. That was the real crime, not the stolen title, not the fake praise. It was how they made me small, quiet, unseen so Eli could feel big. And still, I didn't move too soon. One afternoon, Eli wandered into my office, holding a folder upside down. He looked tired, a bit sweaty, collar askew. He smiled like a child looking for his teacher. Hey Dev, he said, voice light, casual. Quick one for you. Do we still use the Tier 2 triggers on the Q2 rollout? Or did you change that up? I turned slowly in my chair. Tier 2? Still active. It's in the operations playbook. Page 12. Eli blinked. Right. The playbook. He hadn't read it. Not once. He had the badge. He had the desk. But he had no clue what it meant. He was playing pretend with the legacy I built from scratch. That day, I realized something. I didn't have to expose him. He'd expose himself. I just needed to be ready. I started organizing the files in my cloud by category. Operations protocols. Redacted policies. Data inconsistencies. Call logs. Anything that painted the picture I already knew was real. I created a timeline. I labeled every interaction by date. Not for drama. Not for revenge. For clarity. For truth. If they ever tried to bury me again, I would have the whole shovel. The office grew colder as the sun sank lower. Outside, the city lights were starting to flicker on. I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours. I liked it that way. I worked best in silence. I looked up at the corner of my whiteboard, where a single word remained from the last time I erased everything else. Observe. I nodded once. It was almost time to move to the next word. And I quietly installed a packet sniffer on our internal network Purely for security. Nothing illegal. Just logging. I even backed up key files onto a private cloud. No one noticed. Especially not Greg. They thought I was licking my wounds. But I was memorizing the battlefield. This wasn't going to be revenge through anger.
Norai. No shouting.
Just slow justice. Sharp and clean. 3 weeks passed. Then a month. And every single day, I watched Eli stumble deeper into the hole he couldn't see. I made sure the land beneath him stayed soft enough to feel safe, just firm enough to keep running, and slippery enough to fall when the moment came. He was eager, too eager. The kind of eager that doesn't come from purpose, but from wanting to impress his father. And that eagerness made him careless. The first slip was small. He misread a data report from our regional vendors and approved an order that doubled the freight cost. I caught it that morning, quietly corrected it before finance saw the impact. I didn't tell him, didn't need to. The correction was noted in the logs, but it looked like he'd done it. He even bragged about it later that week. Caught it just in time, he said during the Friday roundtable, nodding like a war general. Got a knack for this stuff. I just nodded back and said, good instincts. The others smiled. He grinned. That was the first rope. The second came during the marketing rebrand. I handed him a completed plan, start to finish. A polished, ready-to-implement timeline with clear stages and deadlines. He skimmed it, tweaked the colors, slapped his initials on it, and sent it to the board. Then promptly forgot about the schedule. Deadlines slipped. Vendors weren't briefed. Assets arrived out of order. He blamed back-end confusion. Greg defended him, of course. Told the team the rebrand delay was part of a bigger strategy pivot. Let's give him some breathing room, he said one afternoon, hand on Eli's shoulder like a coach talking down a sideline boo. I just kept feeding him rope. I started marking key items in the systems we used, little red flags buried deep in file metadata. Not visible to the eye, but traceable if you knew what to look for. Eli kept using my work, kept making promises, and I let him run as far and as fast as he wanted, because I knew he wasn't wearing shoes, just ego. Entitlement blinds people. It makes them think the road is theirs. But the road keeps a record. During a Thursday stand-up, Eli made a joke. Loud enough for the whole office to hear. Guess this job runs in the blood, he said, laughing as he sipped from a company mug. Must be in the Morris genes. Some people chuckled politely. I didn't. I just looked at him for a second, then turned back to my screen. But inside, I filed that moment away. Said everything. The final string snapped during the Q3 analytics cycle. I had already prepped the internal review doc, meant only for senior ops. A clean draft, raw data, unfiltered. I left it open just long enough on the shared server for someone curious to peek. Sure enough, Eli downloaded it and sent it to Greg with a few changes. But he didn't realize the report was missing a final audit layer. The numbers were wrong. Subtle but wrong. I waited. That weekend I assembled my package. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't emotional. It was methodical. I copied email threads, pulled server logs showing duplicate report access, annotated invoices that had been altered. Then, at the very end, I added the crown jewel. The recording. It had happened the day after Eli's party. Greg had called someone on our shared comms platform. Didn't realize the recording function was active, one of those harmless quirks from an old screen-sharing plugin we both used. The call auto-recorded if a session started with certain permissions. Most people had forgotten it even existed, but I hadn't. I played it back again as I added it to the file. Dev? Oh, he'll get over it. Greg's voice crackled, calm, dismissive. But Eli needs this title to feel like he belongs here. Once he stabilizes, maybe we give Dev some bones to chew on. Keep him busy. His tone was so casual. Not cruel, just calculated. Like I was a dog waiting for scraps. That part burned deeper than the betrayal itself. I compressed the files, encrypted them, and sent them through an anonymous submission tool used by the company's compliance office. I didn't sign it, didn't add context, just truth. Straight from their own system. Let the pieces fall where they would. Monday came. Nothing happened. Tuesday, the office buzzed with rumors about budget audits. I played dumb. Eli asked if I could run numbers on the vendor summaries again. I nodded, printed him a clean version, let him walk right into the next tripwire. Then Thursday morning came. I arrived early as usual. Lights were still flickering on across the 14th floor. The air was sharp, cold from overnight settings. I sat at my desk and sipped my coffee like it was just another day. Then the elevator doors opened. 3 men in dark suits stepped out. One held a tablet. The other 2 had folders. They walked past reception without introducing themselves. HR must have already cleared their visit. Audit team. The first stop was Eli's office. I watched through the frosted glass as they asked him to log into his system. I saw his face twist from confused to concerned. Then panic. His hands shook as he pointed at the screen, clearly trying to explain something. One of the auditors took out a flash drive and plugged it into his desktop. The other was taking notes. Fast. Focused. By noon, his access had been revoked. He came out pale, walked straight to the break room and stood there for almost 10 minutes, just staring at the counter like it would give him answers. An hour later, Greg was summoned to the boardroom. He didn't come out for nearly 90 minutes. When he did, his jacket was slung over his arm, and his tie was stuffed into his pocket. His hair was messy, eyes hollow. He passed by my desk without a word. He didn't look at me. He knew. Everyone knew. But I didn't smirk, didn't gloat. I closed out my system, clicked send on a transfer email to the team, then typed my final line of code. My last contribution. A small cleanup script to clear outdated records. My version of wiping my fingerprints from the scene. Clean, efficient, professional. I stood up, smoothed out my shirt, grabbed my things and walked down the hall. I didn't take the elevator with anyone else. I waited for an empty one, not out of pride, just peace. When the doors opened, I pressed the button for HR and rode down in silence. And I just typed my final line of code, closed my terminal and walked down to HR with my letter. Certainly. Here's the expanded and immersive version of Part 4. The Return, The Reclaim, written in first-person narration, with detailed atmosphere, emotional weight, cinematic flow, and a complete sense of closure while staying true to the structure and content of the original part. The coffee was still hot when I reached the 12th floor. Steam curled lazily from the rim of the cup as I stepped toward the wide glass wall overlooking the city. There it was, directly across the street, tall and gray and quiet. Greg's tower. The one I had once walked into every morning, shoulders tight with unspoken weight, carrying the load they pretended not to see. Now I stood on the other side of the battlefield. The office behind me smelled of polished oak and fresh carpet. A new desk, wide and clean. My name already etched on the door. Director. Not assistant. Not acting. No one's shadow. No one's placeholder.
Mine.
I took a long sip. The taste was sharper than I remembered, or maybe it was just clearer now without the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. Movement caught my eye in the tower across the street. A few people filed into the lobby, faces I recognized, heads slightly bowed. The company was still running, technically. But something was missing now, something they couldn't recover. And they knew it. Mr. Devlin? A voice said from behind me. I turned slowly. Sam, the firm's liaison, stood in the doorway, tablet in hand. Neatly dressed, early 30s, sharp but not smug. HR has everything finalized. Your benefits packet is on your desk. And the executive team's excited to have you join this afternoon strategy meeting. I nodded once. Thank you. He hesitated. One more thing, he said. Our CEO asked if you wanted to make a formal announcement. Maybe a post? A statement about the move? I glanced once more at the tower across the street. Then I turned away from the window. No, I said. Nothing public. Just the work. Sam gave a small, respectful smile. Understood. He left and I sat down at the new desk. My desk. The keyboard felt lighter beneath my fingers. The light overhead was softer. Even the air here didn't hum with the tension I'd grown so used to. I took out a pen, clicked it once, and scribbled a small to-do list on the edge of a notepad. Felt strange, almost too simple. But I reminded myself, I had already fought the fire. This part was about planting again. I opened my inbox. No frantic messages. Number 2 a.m. pings demanding I patch someone else's mistake. Just clean correspondence. Clear expectations. It was almost unsettling. I scrolled idly, fingers brushing past a few welcome emails, client memos. Then I paused. There, buried halfway down, was one subject line that stuck out. Gregory Stanton reference check. I clicked it. A recruiter had reached out, asking if I could speak to Greg's leadership skills in a confidential background review. I stared at the message for a long time. My finger hovered over the reply button. But I didn't click it. Let someone else speak for him. I had done enough. Instead, I opened a new tab and pulled up the company dashboard. I liked what I saw. Clear numbers, transparency, measurable KPIs, no smoke and mirrors. I worked through the morning, slow and methodical. Each task another quiet reminder that I was building something honest now, something real. At 11:45, I stood again and walked back to the window. It had started to rain, thin lines streaking the glass like ghost trails. Down below, a man in a charcoal coat stepped into the plaza of the old tower. Even from here, I recognized the cautious gait. Eli. He had changed, trimmed his hair. Gone was the cocky walk, the laugh that used to bounce too loudly in the halls. He looked smaller now, lighter in a defeated way. He checked his phone, then glanced up. Our eyes didn't meet, he couldn't see me. But I watched him for a long time. He stood there in the drizzle, waiting. No one came out to meet him. Eventually, he turned and walked away. A knock tapped at my door. I didn't turn immediately. Come in. Another voice entered, deeper this time. The CEO, Marcus Llewellyn. A man who had built this firm without shortcuts, without bloodlines. His handshake on interview day had been firm, direct. He stepped inside now with his hands folded behind his back. I saw your numbers, he said. You kept another company afloat from behind a curtain. Not many would walk away from a place they helped build. I turned. They never let me build. I was just holding it up while someone else claimed they were the architect. He nodded. You'll get to build here. I believed him. He stepped out without another word. The rest of the day passed without rush or panic. I met with product leads, reviewed the roadmap, sketched out long-term ideas I'd never been allowed to present before. And when I left that evening, the city felt different. Not bigger, not smaller, just balanced. I didn't walk past the old tower. I didn't need to. The next morning, I arrived earlier than expected. The elevator chimed softly as I stepped onto my floor. The lights flickered on in sequence, one by one. I walked to the window again and watched a team file into Greg's old building. But I knew the truth. The names on the walls had changed. The confidence was gone. The legacy they tried to force into place had cracked. No more safety nets. No more puppeteers. Just the ruins of a system that refused to listen until it was too late. I turned away from the glass, dropped my coat on the hanger, and powered up my screen. There was no smile on my face. No bitterness either. Just stillness. I had done what I came to do. And now, I was free to create, not defend. There was no applause. No one waited with cake in the break room.
No speeches, no slideshow.
Just quiet. And that was enough. Because revenge didn't come in fire or fury. It came in the form of a quiet return, a silent watch from across the street, and the knowledge that they now had to sit in the ruin they built. Alone. Without me. Because I had saved the company. And this time I saved myself.